We had a really fantastic time doing the Interfaith series, and it was great to hear the different perspectives, mainly to maybe dispel some myths that we've had against certain people in different faiths, but also to create a sense of empathy, to create a sense of compassion. And we ended the series with Gina Pollard, and I don't know if you were able to go to that specific one in particular, but she spoke about grief and deconstruction and faith transitions, interfaith relationships. And the thing that was really interesting, I wasn't able to be there, I was in Mexico that week, but I went back and I watched it, and what was interesting is how many of the things she said in regards to grief really hit home for a lot of us that have done deconstruction, or a lot of us that have had, maybe you have parents that believe differently than you, or maybe you have a partner that believes differently than you. You have to walk sort of this tension that comes with both beauty but also some complexity and some grief. And she said these words, I bring her up mainly because she said these words that really stuck with me, and I thought they were worth repeating. She says, in the Western world, we're taught how to accumulate things, we're not taught how to lose things. And I thought that is so true in our Western minds. We're taught to collect, to consume, to make money, to accumulate, and it's really hard for us to let things go. Really hard. And as humans, losing, letting go, releasing, it doesn't come easily, and it definitely doesn't come naturally to most of us. We want things to always stay the same. We want to hold on tightly. We want to cling. And so Mother Nature, on the other hand, whom I think most of us should take our cue, she does a lot of things really effortlessly. Mother Nature just, it's like it's very innate within her. Mother Nature knows how to do change and seasons effortlessly. She sheds her leaves and exposes herself vulnerably to the world around her. Seasons come and seasons go, and actually it seems like with expectation and welcome, like she just knows it. And it made me think, like, we've just entered the season of fall. Last week was fall, which is my favorite time of the year. Just saying, pumpkin spice, I'm that girl. Pumpkin spice, sweaters, comfort food, Halloween, Thanksgiving, changing of leaves, I already said that, but they're one of my favorites. The fact that you don't have to wear oven mitts when you hold the steering wheel anymore, doesn't you know what I'm talking about? The fact that your butt isn't burned the second you're in the chair. It's like sweet, sweet relief. And it's like one of my favorite times. But the thing that also, for me, makes fall that much more sweet, actually any season that much more sweet, is the fact that it's impermanent. The fact that it only comes once a year, unless you're in Portland where fall is perpetual. But here, it's once a year, and it's so sweet. You want to hold on to that thing. It's the sweetness of its coming and its going that makes you want to be present for every single moment of it. And if you aren't, this is your cue to start being that way. Life passes so quickly that one season to the next, and sometimes we forget just to be present here in the moment. So tonight, we're going to talk about the ancient rhythm of seasons. We'll talk about the wisdom literature of Ecclesiastes, wineskins, and new beginnings. You'll notice that the title for tonight is Seasons, and it's the Tao of Solomon. I named it that because it was, I'm not a Taoist now, just in case you're wondering, although I really loved when Phil Yang came and spoke on Taoism, that was amazing. It was inspired by a book I recently read on Ecclesiastes that really just engulfed me. Because it was written from a different lens where it's a rabbi who, the thing I love about rabbis is they have the liberty, they always take the liberty to interpret it to what it means to them. And I love that tradition. They say, this is what I think of when I hear this text. And this rabbi, it basically doesn't do a literal word-for-word translation. What he does is translation meets creative freedom. So he kind of writes in a different narrative where it becomes sort of like interpretation meets poetry. And he really dives in. And so that was the name of his book, and the Tao is a Chinese word meaning way, road, or path. And though the author of Ecclesiastes is unknown, it's traditionally attributed to King Solomon. And King Solomon, if you don't know, some of you might know this story really well, but King Solomon is attributed in the Jewish tradition as being one of the wisest humans ever known. It's been said that he was a man that not only had wisdom, but had pretty much everything he ever wanted. And when I say everything, literally everything. So Solomon had wisdom, as stated. He had wealth. He had fame. He was a king, a ruler, so he had control and power. He had an abundance of food, and he had 900 wives. And I don't know about you, but 900, that does not sound like wise to me. I heard that and I went, oh, I don't know that he was the wisest man on earth. 900 wives, that is a lot of can of worms. The book opens up, though, with these famous words, and a lot of you know these famous words. You've heard them before. If you've been raised in any kind of Christian tradition, you've heard these words many, many times. Meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher. Utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. And it's really dramatic, and I think maybe that's why I like Ecclesiastes. It's really dramatic, it's very poetic, it's sort of this freedom and license to speak from the heart. And it's one of those that's less so much about like Proverbs, which is very live this way. Ecclesiastes is very like, I did live some of that way, and life turned out this way, and what do you do with that? It's sort of like an examination of life itself. But what's interesting is some translations say vanity of vanities, all is vanity. But the Hebrew word points to something that's less depressive than those statements, and that's more about the meaning of life. And it says, Havel Havalim. I'm not Jewish, so we'll just go with that. Havel Havalim, says the teacher, all is Havel. And Havel means like vapor or mist. Again, some of you might be really familiar with this concept. That if we would say that like vapor, everything is vapor, or mist, everything is mist. Everything evaporates. It's here and then it's gone. Rabbi Jonathan Sacks interprets Havel as shallow breath, or a breath exhaled and then expired. It's an emptying upon emptying. And so it doesn't, in my opinion, make that meaningless. Actually, I know that it can feel that way to some people, but instead to me it makes it very meaningful. It's like when you take that breath and you exhale, there is such a gift that it's here and then it's gone. And it shows in this ancient book that nothing is static, nothing is fixed. It's here today, it's gone tomorrow, and usually we don't know where it goes. We make plans and we think we know where it goes, and then it goes where the wind blows. He's pointing to the fact that life is more than what you own, what you accomplish, how many wives you have. But life is really more than, it really at the end of the day is a series of never-ending verbs. And that I thought was really interesting, that life is like a series of never-ending verbs, transitioning from one movement to the next. And the thing that's fascinating to me about that concept is that even in Hebrew, one of the names for God is literally a verb. And it's not a being, but it's a happening. And I love this imagery of the divine, that the divine is a happening. It's not something to obtain, it's something to be in. It's something to partake in. It's something to jump in the flow of. And life is a series of happening moments. The other thing that's fascinating about Ecclesiastes is it really focuses on this concept of time. You get this sense that it's like an inventory of past, present, future. But the thing about past, present, and future is they're all just concepts. And I know it's hard for us to wrap our minds around, but they really are all just concepts. The past, when you think about it, is just a present that I've already lived. And the future is a present that's just unknown. And so when we unravel it this way, it's all the present. It is all the present. It's all happening. You're either in it or you're distracted. You're either focused and you're living in the now, or you're somewhere else. And we've all had those moments of being here and being now, and had these moments of being somewhere else, or wishing things were something else. Now, Ecclesiastes would probably say, and it would probably conclude to the questions that a lot of us say, is like, how do we be in the happening then? How do we be in the happening, especially in today's society when it's just like a whirlwind? How do we embrace the now? How do we live in an uncertain world that has a never-ending cycles of change, never-ending? And Ecclesiastes would probably conclude by telling its readers to cling to nothing. It's very like Zen, like don't hold on to things, don't cling to anything, and to surrender to God, the great happening. One interpretation says it like this, which I love. It says, cling to nothing and allow all to pass. Open your mind to wonder, your heart to compassion, and your hand to justice, that you may fashion a whole and holy world. I love this idea, that when you're not clinging and then when you're here, it's almost like those two thoughts can join. That when you're here and you're present and you don't try to force, this is what happens. You bring forth this wonder, this heart that's full of compassion. And I know this is easier said than done. That's why this is like ancient literature, that it invites us into a way of practice, because it's not something that comes naturally to a lot of us. The wisdom of letting go and making room for what is. So at the beginning of the year, if you were here with us, and we have a lot of different folks, a lot of different demographics. Some of you might have been here since the beginning, and some of you maybe halfway through. So we'll do a quick recap. At the beginning of the year, I started a series which was asking this very question. And the question was, who are we becoming? And the question was really about, without realizing it, it was focusing on, like, who are we as individuals and as a community? And that's what we really started to hone in on. Who are we as individuals? Who are we together as one church? And without realizing it, we set out the rest of the year, which I think, from my perspective, slowly trying to figure out our identity. We did this all year. Like, sort of like, who are we? How are we going to show up in the world? And I spoke on the seasons of life that are marked with uncertainty, with growth and expansion. If you all remember, I used a metaphor about the Polynesians on an expedition. Some of you might remember that metaphor really well. The expedition into the unknown. We might talk more about that next week. But I also used another metaphor, which is really just a parable that Jesus tells regarding new wine into old wineskins. Again, if you're familiar with it, go with me on this one. I recap everything because I don't know who knows what in the room, and it's better to make sure we're all on the same playing field here. That in this story, the particulars of the story are really antiquated, truthfully, as is most scripture, the particulars are, because no one uses wineskins anymore. But in the universals, the larger part of the story is still really applicable to today. And that's what I think is so fascinating to me about some of these ancient stories. Is a quick recap about that is the story goes on to say, Jesus goes on to basically says that no one pours this new wine into an old wineskin. Because if you do, the skins will be ruined, they'll break. He then even adds another caveat that when people have had an old wine and an old wineskin for a long time, they don't actually want the new wine. So there's also that. There's sort of this two lesson here, like don't pour new into old, and then also most people that are like the old, they don't want the new. And when you look at the entire thing, out of context, you're kind of like, I'm not really sure what this is talking about. You start to dig in and you're like, he's not talking about wine. Thus, Jesus is very much the Zen master this way. He's usually not talking about the actual thing he's talking about. And he's speaking about like new ideas or new teaching at this time. And so he speaks basically on us not wanting to let go of what is, which is very applicable to all of us. We find something, no matter what it is, where we just want to hold on to it. And at that time, the new wine was stored in fresh animal skins. I said this earlier in the year, but it's gross, but we might as well go into it. That new wine, it ferments and it gives off gases, which causes an expansion. So there's a change, there's a growth, there's an expansion. The new wineskins, because it's fresh, has a fresh elasticity. Yep, it's gross, but it's just reality. And it would expand with it. So when you put that newness in the newness, there's like this ebb and flow of expansion together. It's sort of this dance of, yes, we're growing together. The two over time really grow. But then eventually, with enough time and enough uses and enough new in the old, the wineskin itself becomes a little rigid. It gets set out in the sun, the heat, the dry air. It all starts to kind of make this once elastic wineskin get a little bit rigid. And so then if you continue to pour this new wine, which as I said before causes expansion, in a rigid container that's also a very thin material, it eventually would cause it to crack and break open. So it's sort of this lesson that it kind of ruins both things when you do that. And knowing that Jesus isn't talking about actual wine and wineskins, he's using this analogy to really talk about new ideas or new teaching or resisting change or periods of growth. it made me start to ask the question when I thought about it again in this context with Ecclesiastes and change. And it made me think, like, when do we as people, each and every one of us, when do we as people lose our own flexibility and become rigid? Because we do. We have seasons where we do. I have had many seasons where I'm like, this is it. Put a flag in it. I'm never moving. I've discovered the next best thing. Until that feels a little shaky. And life might push me over here. And I feel like I don't know where the heck I'm going. And then again, you have this sense of resting in this thing. And we do this as people. We can sort of get into these spots where we're no longer able to change or grow. Or we are, but we don't seem like we are. We seem a little less flexible. And we've all had seasons of expansion and seasons of constriction. So how do we learn to surrender to what is? This is the practice I'm trying to do in my own life. It's way easier when life is awesome. Way easier when life is awesome. Really difficult when life is bad. And I think in some ways that is a little bit of what this wisdom, even in Ecclesiastes, of what it's saying, is it's not saying like, just forget about it, don't embrace that moment, don't feel it, pretend like everything's okay. In fact, I would say it's sort of like when things are sweet, cherish it and make it sweeter. When things are sad, feel the sadness and know they won't last forever. There's this sense of knowing that the moment you're in won't last forever, and so you will cherish it for whatever it's worth. Or if it's a terrible moment, you know that it won't last forever. It gives you this sense of relief. So sometimes when you experience, though, those seasons of change, like those wineskins, your old ways can't contain it. And so then I had another thought, simmering over this ancient wisdom. I started to think another question is, at what point does something new become old? Because that's also an interesting thing, because everything old was once new, and we forget that. It's a really common thing. We forget that everything old actually once was new. Everything that dies once was born. Everything that grows once was small. It had this beginning, and we forget that. Think about it from a very practical. Let's take it out of the ether into very practical things. The car you drive that now has 80,000 miles on it, anybody there with me? Has a lot of mileage on your car. And the house that you bought maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago that maybe has some things going wrong with it. The marriage, how about this one? This one stings a little. The marriage that maybe feels like it's in a slump and it no longer has that shine and glimmer to it. I saw a few exchanges, not pointing anybody out. That job that you're bored to tears with, that you once loved. It was all new. We forget this. We forget this in moments when things are old. It was all new, fresh with purpose and excitement, thrill even, like absolute thrill. And I think that this is something interesting that you hear in Ecclesiastes is about nothing's new. And you hear all about this old and new. And I think it's the importance of paying respect to once was when moving forward in life. Like, we tend to do this. We often tend to do this. Oh, that marriage that ended, it was always bad. Or, oh, that car that's falling apart, it was always a piece of junk. Unless it was always a piece of junk. But even then, it was once new. Maybe it's a piece of junk to you. It was once new. That faith I once had, we do this often, that's completely ridiculous. That church I used to go to, that was terrible. We have a way of rewriting history. We all do this. We have a way of rewriting history when we've reached the end of something. We superimpose the end and make it the whole way through the narrative. The whole entire thing's bad. So this ended this way, it's all terrible. It's all garbage. Get it away from me. And it's very extreme in that sense. Instead of kind of doing what this wisdom is saying is sort of like being grateful for what that season was. That season was that. Honor it, be grateful for it, let it go with open hands, invite something new. Because everything old was once something new. Which is always a reminder to me that when I come up with new ideas, new concepts, new jobs, new friends, those too become old someday. And it's such an interesting cycle of life. It's bittersweet, really, right? There's a sense of sadness to this, but also this sense of like joy and wonder and awe. Ecclesiastes 1:9 talks about the very thing, about newness and old. And it says, what has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun. My favorite interpretation of that is there's nothing new, only forgetfulness masquerading as creativity. Is that not good or what? There's nothing new, only forgetfulness masquerading as creativity. There's literally nothing new. Sometimes I've been hired on for many, many projects in my life to come up with like a new concept for someone or a fresh brand or this idea, and you think you're embarking on something completely radical. And it may be, but it also may be an idea that's been had for centuries. It might not actually be that new. Speaking of which, how many of you remember this little thing? Anybody with me? Yes. Yes, I still have mine, Chelsea. I heard you. Dang, you still have yours? How many? I'm not a hoarder, I swear. How many of you have a collection of like dinosaur electronics and you just don't know what to do with them? That is me. That is me, especially with Apple electronics. I don't know why. It signifies like a certain, especially it's like music. Some of these, like this one still works. And like it signifies a certain time. There's like a certain playlist, a certain thing. And it's so interesting to be like, oh, you're a little time capsule. What do you got on this thing? This little iPod Nano, 2006, it was revolutionary, like revolutionary. Its older sister, the Brick. Anybody with me on this one? Like, I can get it to turn on. You can't even see it. I can get it to turn on. It's just like a little apple, and that's all it does. And then it makes like a blip. Oh, I wish you could hear this. You can't. I wish you could hear it because what it sounds like is old. It literally is going whir. It's like making a whirring sound. Oh, and then it basically just shows an error folder. This thing, which won't even work anymore, won't even function anymore. This thing was once revolutionary. The iPod, I keep wanting to call it an iPad because it's not even in my vocabulary anymore. The iPod was once something so new. When this came out, everyone wanted it. Everyone had to have it. And it's brand new. Could you imagine, though, if we didn't go from, if we didn't move on to this, and we didn't move on to this, and we stayed here with things? The purpose, if you think about it, the purpose is the same. The purpose is the exact same. All of them do what? Play music, except for this one that's dead. It's supposed to. They play music. They do it in very, very different ways. Today, we don't even have these. We have digital streaming. They all serve the same function, the exact same function. They just do it in different formats, in different ways. That's what change looks like. Does this at all, because I can't help it being someone that's a pastor, does this remind you of maybe religious institutions? If we say this, how do we become this? How do we become this? How do we become something that isn't even born yet? It takes the idea, it takes the newness to bring forth a further iteration of a thing that's always been. The thing I love is like that saying, there's nothing new under the sun. Think about it though. Before this, we had CDs. Before that, we had, 8 tracks. Before that, we had records. Before that, we had, I don't even know what those giant megaphone thingies are called. Before that, we had, the list goes on, and who knows what our ancient ancestors had. Before that, they probably had a different way of recording. Then they had drums. Then they had their voices. It's all the same. Can you see that? It's all the same essence in the same format. It's just in different ways. And this is what can happen if you become rigid or fixed. You become the iPod that no longer works. The wisdom that Solomon is pointing us to is that everything is cyclical and ever-changing. And it's really uncomfortable. Some of you love change, some of you hate it. And depending on what the change is, sometimes I love it and sometimes I hate it. But nothing stays the same and nothing is permanent. So if seasons change, why don't we think we will as well? We tend to think seasons change or things change. That changes, but but it's hard to remember sometimes that we do, or the person that we love does, or the relationship that we had, or our faith does. You're not the same person that you used to be. At least I hope not. Anybody here the same as they used to be? That was an awkward silence intentionally. I saw a few people confused. I'm like, okay, think about that. I'm not the same person I used to be. And if you've known me for a long time, if you've known me for a really long time, you would know that I'm not the same person I used to be. But if you've known me even for a few years, you know that I'm not the same person I used to be. Church culture isn't even the same as it used to be. Spirituality isn't the same as it used to be. And certainly neither is one church. So to say, as we started at the very beginning of the year with that question, who are we, where are we becoming, what's happening, what is this journey we're embarking? To say that we have, that one church has been filled with seasons of change is like a giant understatement. I would say, if you've been here for any length of time, it's a giant understatement. We felt the tension and what I would call, just because my mind likes metaphors, we have felt that tension and what is like the groan of wineskin expansion. We have felt it. We felt like this uncomfortable shift of like something new taking place, but it's in something old and familiar. And just like you've probably felt with your own life and your own spirituality. So I'd like to share with you what's developing this season, and I think it'll be a good one. So before you get fear and panic, I think it'll be a good one. Speaking of seasons, one church is in its 7th year, which has been a long time, and actually that's operating as a church. It goes even further back. We started as a house church, and it kind of just slowly exploded from there in different forms, in different ways, in different iterations. We've met in multiple locations. Some of you remember the trampoline park. We've wrestled over a lot of different faith topics. We've had 3 pastors, each bringing a completely different identity and flair to the community. Over the past few years, church itself, not just our church culture itself, and American culture has continued to change and shift and evolve at what feels like lightning speeds. Things are shifting rapidly, everything from politics to our religion. The way that our human consciousness is expanding, it's changing the ways that we're approaching Scripture, our ideas of God, spirituality, LGBTQ issues, topics of race, social justice, gender roles, gender identity, sexuality, politics, and church structures. It's just this rapid expansion that I think most of you are like, I see it. I see it all around me. And it's happening so quickly. Over time, at one church, we started to see this rapid expansion started changing and affecting the way we were and affecting the way we did things. And we became a place, basically, for people to deconstruct their faith, for people to come find healing. Many of you, actually, came because of that reason. To come and find a place of rest, to find a place of healing where maybe there was wounds. Aaron, the previous pastor, and I, who's one of my favorite humans, by the way, we often joked and said that we felt like we were a hospital because we became a place that really helped people heal from spiritual trauma. We really did. And matter of fact, they were coming faster than we knew what to do with them. And it felt like triage nurses. Like, okay, get the gloves on, put the masks on. I mean, that's how it felt. It was like, you're wounding, you're hurt, you're hurt, you're hurt, you're hurt. We're hurt together. We're all kind of in this, like, let's help. And it became this thing where there was so much wounding. And while the hospital is so necessary, beyond necessary, no one wants to stay there. No one wants to stay there. It's not an ideal place to build community. And this is true. And this is true. Throughout the years of deconstruction, we've seen people come and go. We've seen people heal. We've seen people heal to the point where they're like, oh, I'm good now. Don't need church. We've seen people heal and go, oh, I found a different expression. We've seen people heal and go, oh, I found a different community that resonates with me. And it's been an ebb and flow. And there's a huge chunk of folks, and even many of you here today, that no longer hold the same faith perspectives that you did when you walked through our doors. And I have to be honest, that's myself included. The faith perspective I had when I walked through one church nearly 4 or 5 years ago is radically different. Radically different. I myself, I've said this before, so it won't come as any shock at all, that I've said this before, that Christianity to me, it's like my native tongue. And this is the only, I use this metaphor a lot lately because it's the only analogy I can think of that articulates closely to what I'm trying to say. That for me, Christianity is my native tongue, it's my heritage, it's my roots, it's my language that I learned first. But yet, if I'm honest, I've learned to appreciate and even understand and love other languages. And that does something. That does something to your spirituality and to your faith. It expands you in ways that make it difficult to stay in the container. It expands in ways in which it can break the container, because that container wasn't meant for that. And I say this because as progressive as our community is, and it's very progressive, that hasn't always been well received. That hasn't always been well received, this idea of sometimes being a little outside the box. The idea of sometimes saying, yes, I see this, but I also see this. I see the divine in this, but I also see that in this. It hasn't always been well received, and I understand that. Because there's a certain amount of fear in hearing other narratives for any of us. The first time you hear a narrative that's starkly different from your own, and I'm scrolling way back to an Angie that was extremely, extremely evangelical. First time I heard anything remotely different from me, it was threatening and scary. Either offensive or wrong or scary, it was intimidating. And so I understand in many ways there's a certain amount of fear that comes in hearing other narratives other than our own, and a certain level also that we have to be honest with of comfort in embracing our own. And each of us do this on some level, and no one's better than the other. We all just are where we are at. And that's something that should be said. We're all where we're at, and we're on the path we're on because that's where we're supposed to be. Yet I personally have felt so many times so drawn to live out a spirituality that embraces the divine in all things. And I've said this so many times. I blame it on Rob Bell. I blame it on Richard Rohr. I blame it on Thich Nhat Hanh. I blame it on the times that I took a walk by myself and I felt something speak to me so deeply in my bones. I blame it on the conversations I've had with people that I'm like, you and I don't share the same faith background at all, but I see what people would call Christ in you. I blame it on all of those things where I've seen the divine revealed in everything and everyone. And so I personally feel that desire to live a life that embraces that. And mind you, one that doesn't exclude Christianity, but certainly one that isn't limited to it. And that's my narrative. And so as a community, you've probably felt that over time. It's like, well, Angie just quoted the Quran this week. That's weird. That's out of left field. I think as a community and myself, I feel like we've been like a caterpillar. The imagery that comes to my mind is like we've been a caterpillar trying to become a butterfly, but we're stuck in our own chrysalis. That's how it's felt. There's expansion, but we're stuck. Expansion, but I'm stuck. Expansion, but I'm stuck. And I keep saying it's time to shed that chrysalis. It's time to shed the wineskin because it's breaking. And if you look around, you can see it's breaking. And I don't say that in doom and gloom. That may sound disheartening. I say that to be honest. I say that to name the truth of what is. We aren't who we once were, and I think it's time, personally, that we claim the identity. We claim the new identity, even if it's not 100% solidified. And it made me think of a quote by Jeff Goins, who's an author, a speaker. He says these words, which are stunning. He says, when we let go of what was, we open up a space for what could be. This, I think, is an act of faith. To stop doing what other people may consider good or worthwhile and do something else, something that seems truer. That is what I feel Spirit saying to me now. Do the thing truer. Do the thing truer. You're not Aaron, in case you're wondering, I'm not going anywhere. But this is the thing that I feel is there's different people. I see a few people going, Angie, hold up. I'm not going anywhere. It's all good. I feel that tug in my heart of do the thing more true. Do the thing more true. And it might not look like typical church. And so after taking a lot of time to think over our missions, our values, who we've been, that we have largely identified as a progressive Christian church. We largely have services that look a certain way. We largely have teaching that looks a certain way. We have had a format that is a certain way. And I'm not saying it's bad, but for me, and this is my truth, it feels like this sometimes. And I feel like many, many times I'm ready for this, which is my timer, by the way. And so I've been asking, why do we do the things we do? It's not only what we do, it's why we do them that is important. If we just do what we do to do the thing we do, why? And so for me, this is why it's been decided by the board and myself that we move in a new direction. I'm excited. I think it's thrilling that I'm excited to announce that we'll be shifting away from an identity as one church. And we'll be moving into a new spiritual community all of its own called Resonance. And this is based on the idea of, and I'll walk you through this. Close your eyes for a minute, if you want. Okay. You know that feeling when you hear a deep, resounding truth that echoes in your bones? Like it could be wisdom. It could be a melody to a song, a heartfelt story, or a vastness of the night sky. I want you to think of that feeling right now. When you hear something that rings true, it does something deep in your gut. It does something deep in your heart. It shakes you. It reverberates you. This feeling of connecting to wisdom, this feeling of connecting to sacredness that we all share, that reminds me of this imagery of a singing bowl. And if you've ever heard one and you play it, it reverberates loud. Or think of, as you have your eyes closed, a piano. And someone's playing the piano keys, and then you have next to it someone with the pitch of a tuning fork. And the piano slowly matches that pitch of the tuning fork, and you start to hear it sync up. And you start to hear it get louder and louder, and it resonates with overwhelming presence. It's uncanny if you've ever heard it. It kind of starts to wobble and sync up until it just takes over everything. That is resonance. You can open your eyes if you want. If you want to keep going with the eyes closed, you can. That is resonance. That syncing up, the thing that says, yes, I feel that truth within you and me. Yes, those lyrics I hear, yes, I feel that deep within my bones. And I think that we've been searching for the reverberating bass note that often gets lost in the treble of modern church. I think most of us are. I think most of us are plumbing, looking for deep depths. And a lot of times we're just getting really shallow. And I'm not saying that we've been shallow, but I think there's a deeper depth of well there. Something deeper, something that resonates. And so I just want you to know that the planning is still a work in progress. There's still a desire, however, though, to bring about a community that cultivates what I would say is spiritual autonomy. I've talked about this so many times this year. What is the truth within you? What's welling up within you? What is the sacred saying within you? And it celebrates the sacredness in all things. All things. To be a community that is focused on experiences and how we live in this world, rather than being centered solely on what we believe and rather than solely on a talking head, but a communal experience. The thing is, when you say something new and all you've ever seen is this, it feels like, how are you going to do that? That's the only blueprint you know. But it takes an innovator to say, I don't know, but I think maybe it could look like this. I don't know, maybe it could look like this. And you better believe there were schematics and blueprints and plans and testing and trying. So I would love to be a community that creates more touch points for connection. We talk about connection a lot, but yet this is our only point of connection, Saturday night. And I don't know about you, but meeting on Saturday night doesn't create intimacy if you're looking for intimacy. It doesn't create deep relationship if you're looking for relationship. And if you're looking for that, I would like to have more intentionality with that, to have dialogue and creativity. And so without giving you a speech, I just want you to know how much this community means to you and me, is what I really meant to say. This community has meant so much to me. I can't, and I'm going to try not to blubber, I can't articulate it or put it into words what this community has meant for me. It's been formational. It's allowed me to ask the questions. It's been the space where I didn't even know that I even needed to ask the questions. I was good. I just needed someone to accept me because I was gay. That was it. I didn't even have the questions yet. And then I had lots of questions, and the questions begat questions until all that was left was questioning, and all that was left was mystery. And it wasn't even doubt. At that point, it was just like a glorious mystery of, I don't know. And I'm okay with that. And this space has allowed me to do that. But I'm not that person I was when I said yes to being a pastor here. I'm not. And I think there's power in naming it. There's power in saying, yeah, I'm not that person. You're probably not either. We aren't either. And I want you to know that journeying alongside of you has been an honor, and I'm grateful for each and every single one of you for the hard work that you've done. I also know that for some of you, you all react to change differently. And so I will add a caveat. If you're like me, you're a delayed processor. You might have a quick feeling, but then you need to go sit on it for a couple days. Do that. Sit on it. Think it over. I know that change is difficult for some people. I know this won't resonate with everybody because I know the direction that I'm thinking is something that's a little bit more expansive and free, something that might be a little less structured. And so I want to invite you into that journey if you want, if it resonates with you. But give it some thought. Give it some thought and see where chances are if you're still here and you're still listening and it's been all this time and you've been through all that change, you're like, yeah, that does resonate with me. But it's my desire that we would choose our sacred path that we're meant to walk on as a community, as individuals. And so I imagine that you'll have tons of questions because I didn't give a lot, of specifics of what resonance is. Because that is a whole conversation in and of itself. And so we're going to continue this conversation. Next week, we'll have more conversations with that. Next week, we'll do a dinner in the mission hall. And I'll share even further the heart behind it, the why behind it. And then the next service after that is October 19th. And that one will be in here. And that's a more reflective service. This one, take note of. This one is, if you can make it, this one is really special because that one is our last service meeting as one church. So that is our very last one meeting as we are. So that one, I would love for you to pay honor and respect to what was. One church wasn't my vision. One church belongs to someone else who has a vision going. And what is easy for all of us to do is to, again, rewrite the narrative of this vision. And instead, I want to celebrate it and honor it. It's been a beautiful thing. It's been a beautiful journey. So if you can come on that day, October 19th, because it'll be beautiful with music and some sharing, some storytelling, to pay respect and honor for that. We have then the launch of Resonance. And I'm careful to say relaunch because this isn't exactly the same thing. We might be some similar people that go to this, but I'm talking about doing a new thing with a new container. And so that will be on December 21st for a Christmas gathering. So I want to invite you to that. You'll notice in between dates of October 19th and December 21st, there's a little bit of a time period. We're taking a very intentional, though I know might sound crazy, a very intentional 6-week sabbatical. And it's super intentional because, one, we want to pay honor, respect, and homage to what was. I keep likening it to, it's sort of like if you dated for someone for a while and then the next week you show up with someone else. That's weird. We're giving some, it's a little awkward. We want to let that be what it is. Honor that. And then also it gives us time to prepare for what's to come. To focus on what does it look like to be these people that want to gather, to honor the sacredness in all. That wants to be a people that really is intimately involved in each other's lives, however you see fit. To be a place that wants to serve, that wants to be involved in justice, to create a more beautiful and wonderful world. And that helps us during this time to plan and be intentional. To be intentional. Truth be told, behind the scenes, a lot of things that have happened at one church are still operating on this operating system. And it's true, if you've ever been a volunteer here, a lot of things are still operating on a very outdated system. Some things don't work quite right, some things get a little broken, and it's time to update, it's time to do a reboot. So during this time, however, in case you're like, but this is my lifeblood, I love these people, during this time, there will be opportunities for connection and meetups. So I want to say specifically, if you're interested in, and this is where I need help, because I'm going to be focusing on planning a lot of things. This is where I need the community to help plan things. That if you're interested in hosting a meetup to keep the community gathering together, to connect with one another, to add support for one another, add your name to the email and the sign-up sheet in the lobby. So there's a sign-up sheet out back. You could add your name and your email, and you can host a thing and do a thing. And that, it could be whatever you want it to be. It could be bowling, it could be dinner, I don't mind. But the other thing we're going to do during that time that I'm excited to announce is a Lovin action trip to Mexico. And that is planned for November 29th through December 1st. So I know it's right after Thanksgiving. It's very intentional. Instead of Black Friday and spending, we're intentionally going, and instead of spending money, we're going to go ahead and serve during that time. And that, I think, would be really great for us that might really want to focus in on this new community and saying, how can we serve and how can we connect during that time? So if you are interested in that as well, you can go ahead and go online to livewildadventures.com, and there's also a sheet out front that has the information. Musicians can come up at this time, and I want you all to just feel free to go ahead and take a collective deep breath with me. Okay, let it out. Because I feel like that was a lot for you to absorb. It was like, what is happening? You're going to have questions of what is happening, and there's also a lot of things, like we have some time and what's going on. I want you to go ahead and take time and process that. As I said before, this is that open invitation where if this resonates with you, we want you to be a part of this journey. And we know that not everyone will, and that's where seasons of change become bittersweet. That's where it becomes bittersweet. So I want you, if you would like, to go ahead and find a comfy spot. And go ahead and close your eyes if you'd like. And we'll wrap up with a prayer and benediction, and then we'll sing a song together before we go. Breathing in together, we share the same breath. Breathing out, we're reminded of its preciousness, its vapor. May we honor and hold gently our past, and may we live fully into the present. May we look into the future in hope and in surrender. Blessed is the path on which you travel. Blessed is the body that carries you on it. Blessed is your heart and your soul full of desires. Blessed is your mind as it discerns along the way. In every season, may we be blessed by the gift, not only of the path, but who we will become on this journey. May it be so. Amen.
I'm going to do something that I want to do. So follow along. Jesus loves me, and shine for the Bible that tells me so. Little ones to him belong. They are weak, but he is strong. Lord, I lift your name on high. Lord, I love to sing your praises. I'm so glad you're in my life. I'm so glad you came to save us. You came from heaven to earth to show the way from the earth to the cross. My debt to pay, from the cross to the grave, from the grave to the sky. Lord, I lift your name on high. Shout to the Lord, all the earth, let us sing. Power and majesty, praise to the King. Mountains bow down and the seas will roar at the sound of your name. I sing for joy at the work of your hand. Forever I'll love you, forever I'll stand. Nothing compares to the promise I have in you. My Savior, He can move the mountain. My God is mighty to save. He is mighty to save forever. Author of salvation, He rose and conquered the grave. Jesus conquered the grave. He rose and conquered the grave. Jesus conquered the grave. When I wake up in the morning,
That brought me back about like 10 years, maybe, not even, 5, no, 20? I'm that old, 20 years, 10? Man, nostalgia. Y'all want to stand with me one last time? Well, not one last time, but one last time this evening. We're not in Catholic Mass. One last time this evening. May you be full of love. May you be full of grace. May you choose the path by simply taking the step. May you be loved, and may you love others. May it be known. Grace and peace this week. Much love to you all. Have a good one. Take care.